our presenter down at the end of the table here, Dr. Charles Bagley. I was intrigued with what he said he wanted to present on, I guess quite a few months ago. What intrigued me about it was the meridian system in relation to embryology. The reason it intrigued me is because I used to work with Dr. Charles T. McGee, who was one of the pioneers of orthomolecular medicine. Worked with a lot of people in the field. Was good friends with Linus Pauling, Ewan Cameron, other people like that. He personally studied with Vol in Germany, and people like Dr. Paul Nogier in Lyon, France, back in the 1970s. Dr. Nogier is the father of auriculotherapy medicine, kind of like an ear acupuncture map that was more fully developed than the Chinese models. And one thing he found out was each of the tissues had a certain resonant frequency depending on the tissue type, based on the how the embryo starts to develop in the three tissue types: inside, outside, in the middle, in simple terms. And but we never really knew why. But in any case, we used that frequency set 20 years ago when we were manufacturing red infrared light blankets and other products, actually right out of here in the Coeur d'Alene area. And so it seemed like it was very related. Kind of a complex subject, and but being willing to share that and having this model that you're looking at, I think is going to add a lot to the table. For some people, I think it was a little bit kind of, over their head a little bit. But in any case, there's definitely a place for that, and I want to thank you for coming.
I'm glad to be here, among all the free-thinking people and all these brilliant minds that I can tap into and get feedback and ask questions and learn. And it's been a great experience for me.
Okay. So, thank you, Dr. Bagley.
Yeah.
And then Yaro, one of our buddies that continues to push forward with the work of John Bedini and keeping the legacy alive. Hopefully other people will be inspired by his presentation and will experiment with the zero force motor. Obviously there's a lot more to be learned, but as you can see, starting at, I don't know, in the beginning, 20% efficiency, if even that, and being able to go beyond, double that, and there's a long way to go, but and just the discoveries in that, and just keep pushing forward, and your dedication to that is definitely want to recognize you for that, and thanks for coming back and sharing your work on that. So Yaro Stanchak, everybody.
Well, being at the tail end of the conference certainly was a challenge, because I was preceded by numerous interesting presentations, and it was a challenge to kind of live up to it, particularly on the boring subject of ZFM motor on the technical side, with all those diagrams and graphs and everything else that was sure to bore the non-technical person, if you will. But irrespective of that, I truly enjoy coming to the conference. In fact, it's an honor for me to be able to present my explorations. And my thinking is that I'm going to continue doing the explorations, and at least for another year, and push forward as far as we can, and before another obsession comes before me. And once that new obsession appears, then the zero motor will be put aside. But at that point, I can pretty much guarantee that it will be useful, no question of it. And the other thing that impressed the heck out of me was just the general tone of the conference itself, in that it seems like over the past several years, there's been a ramping up of interest and cooperation, and looking at things from a much broader perspective. I would say a younger perspective, and here I am, an old guy. But at the same time, the younger perspective is extremely important, because those are the people that are going to push forward. Those are the people that are the future. Glad to be part of the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Yaro. And Mr. John Petersen, founder of the Arlington Institute, you're one of the most dynamic, incredible presenters I've ever seen. Oh, did you enjoy that presentation? I really didn't know what to expect, but I was pretty blown away by what I saw and how it was presented. And to have somebody like John, in his position and kind of, what his background has been, and being one of the foremost futurists in the world, and with his organization, and wanting to, being willing to spend his weekend with us with this, little conference here in the middle of North Idaho. I sure appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you. Thank you. And then with Eric, we do put up quite a few updates. They're usually edited quite well and cropped, or censored, I should say. Sanitized. So, over the last year or so since the last conference, it's been a bumpy road. He came up here in October or so to get his engine swapped out and was planning on being here for 1 week. Wound up staying for 5 weeks, and what popped out of that time frame was the prototype MWO pulse modulator unit you see down there at the end of the stage. And yeah, absolutely. We could not have done it without Eric's help. We went straight through skipping the entire proof of concept model and went straight to a production prototype, saving many, many, many months, and being able to incorporate all the right grounding features and that kind of stuff. That would have cost 6 figures, to have some engineering firm, do that, and it still wouldn't have been done as good as what Eric could put it together. Also, when he came up, I don't know, a little over a month ago, or it's been kind of a blur recently, but came up, we started working on his presentation, and some of I don't know, year and a half ago or whatever it was, he came down with the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and had to get medevaced from one hospital in California to another one. He was in hospital for quite a while, and there was some other challenges and losing his vision and these kind of things. And when he was up here in Spokane, he went to the VA hospital near my house. They did some blood work, and everything looks fine right now, stabilized at least. So thank God for that. I mean, it's a pretty serious issue, but he's taken a few things and has adjusted his diet, and these things are keeping the platelet counts normalized, and everything is looking pretty good. As far as the seismic project, that's been a challenge. We're still moving forward. Building's almost paid off. It's only about $3,900 balance, and we're looking at putting together a game plan. And we met a few people here at the conference this weekend that looks like they might be instrumental in being able to help move things forward. More with the game plan, and maybe looking at getting a project manager and looking at organizing the whole plan of the finances and the timelines and that kind of stuff. I can only do so much, helping Eric, and we do have some other people who are involved with that. So anyway, it's been a kind of a bumpy road, and but here you are. So thanks for coming back, Eric. And Mr. David Alzofon, this is it's an honor to have you here. It's actually kind of surreal, having met your father 14 years ago in this little restaurant in Corvallis, Oregon, with my friend Noah, and always having that in the back of my mind, wondering what's going to happen with this information or whatever. It was one of the most intriguing conversations I've ever had in my life. Dr. Frederick Alzofon shared some things with me that I don't think that should be discussed publicly, but it was enough to kind of floor me. That entire trip was kind of changed how I looked at things. Some of the things that he shared with me in relation to some of the companies that he was involved with, Lockheed and so forth, and the kind of things going on behind the scenes. And then to be able to find out that you had the information, you understood it, been around it, and actually wanted to move this forward and bring it out to the world, and to be able to do that here at this conference it's an honor. And so thanks for spending your weekend with us and coming up here.
Yeah, thank
Thank you so much.
Do I have a live mic? I feel as if, well, the conference has been a continual surprise to me. And that's largely due to the quality of the audience. Because for the last 20 years or so, every time I've attempted to describe my father's technology to people, I've met with kind of blank stares or disinterest, or sometimes a compelling urge to tell me about some other person who had done the same thing, only better. And so instead I found open minds, curiosity, and actually a widespread willingness to act. And I feel as if after this conference, I have a very surprising feeling at the end of it, and that is that if I came to no other conferences after this one, I would still have set something in motion that will eventually bring about the dissemination of my dad's technology, no matter what I do. And I have Aaron to thank for that.
Thank you.
And so I can't imagine what I'll be hearing next year when I come back, if I come back, and I think we can all look forward to great developments in this technology, because I have a high confidence that it's for real and it will work, and it's not that hard to do. So it was a very productive conference.
Thanks, David.
Sure.
Okay. And go to gravitycontrol.io. That's gravitycontrol.io. That's going to develop into something that's going to document all this work. There will be links provided. At some point after the conference, I'll put together a summary of all the different presenters and the websites and all that kind of stuff associated with all their presentations, so that you can know where to go, what to click on, that kind of thing. On gravity.io, there is the link to the Gravity Control book on Amazon if you didn't get a chance to get one here, and the top 10 UFO riddles, both those books, there's links to Amazon on there. And eventually there'll be links to the papers and other stuff. And there's also the schedule, I think, posted at the top of the website on the radio shows.
Right.
Right. So
Further
that,
interviews,
yeah. So go there, and if you want to be notified on any future updates or whatever, you can just sign up for the mailing list there. So Ken Wheeler, everybody. Yeah. Glad that you were able to make it this year, and especially from the beginning, coming into Energetic Forum, and then showing your passion for that, and originally offering up your book to if that was to be sold, that all the funds could be donated to Eric Dollard. In every aspect, he's been very generous, with his time and his effort to be able to offer that up, and I think that is showing a huge amount of respect. Not only for what we're trying to do, but also for his how he holds Eric's work in high esteem. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I really wanted to say thank you, Aaron, for allowing me to come out here. I don't feel deserving to sit amongst this panel with Eric Dollard, just 2 people down. And I just want to say thanks to everybody for being so incredibly kind. You told me that about this group, and I knew that, but it was so very incredibly kind. I know a couple things for certain, that the only thing we take with us from this world is wisdom, and the only reason I want any stuff at all is so that I can experiment and learn how this world works of ours. And I know that of half the people that are making presentations here, the rest of the world, outside of this conference room, know for a fact that nobody goes looking for the answer to anything if we think we already know the answer to it. So many of the things that people are discovering or experimenting on is fantastic, and hopefully will change the world. And I just want to say thanks to everybody for being so incredibly kind and compassionate, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Anybody have any comments or suggestions, or
Comments or suggestions?
for the audience, or for anybody, or anything you want to share?
Than it was during the conference, because I was up front. So can you get the volume up a little bit, please?
Probably, yeah, I'll turn the volume up. If anybody has any questions, feel free to come up to the microphone.
We're a tough crew up here.
I had a question for David.
Yes.
Are you aware of any, as we transition into gravitic vehicles, do we have to account for any biological hazards, either from the microwave itself or from some transition as we go to a massless state?
The a certain amount of research. I'm getting like this.
Yeah, straight into the microwave.
Like this.
Yeah.
And that works. What do you know? R&D is needed on that, but it's clear that the cabin needs to be shielded from microwaves, and that the occupants of the vehicle need to be shielded from microwave inside the cabin. There's going to be a lot of. Well, I was talking about the kinds of shielding needed within the vehicle, and if I may just bring in some observations about the evidence from UFO sightings. That clearly the occupants are seen wearing silver suits, which would make sense because they would want to conduct nuclear orientation to their bodies and render them inertia-free and gravity-free. And at the same time, the aluminum fabric would shield them from microwaves. So, there's a tremendous amount of research and development that needs to be done. And I'm sure that all of these problems can be overcome. And now you asked about transition to a massless state. I'm going to confess I know nothing about that. I've never been in a massless state. I've been in Massachusetts, but I don't know anything about being massless. I do know that one nice thing about being in a massless state is that you can make right-angle turns at 500 miles an hour or more and not feel a thing. And now I'm, of course, repeating what my father said many times. So I hope that scratches the surface of it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I was hoping next conference we could talk, maybe, I was so happy that they talked about the chemtrails and the barium and the strontium and the nanoaluminum, but I'd like to talk more about smart meters and the attack on the microwave of the 5G called the Beast, which they're using two frequencies that are directly attacking our oxygen and our water molecules, and they're pushing this faster through because we're waking up too fast. So learn about the 5G wireless network that's coming, they call the Beast, and then how it relates to the smart meters and the nano aluminum, which crosses the blood-brain barrier to become an antenna for the 5G. And I don't want to get any crazier than that. So thank you.
Be honest, isn't crazy.
Eric,
This is tough.
want to address that?
No.
Any other questions?
This is a question for John and anybody else who'd like to answer. So given the disruptive potential of this industry, which is vast, as we all know, in what areas do you think the standard business model needs to change, or what changes need to be made to it or deleted from it, or how can we conduct business in this new space in a way that, creates, prosperity for everybody?
I think in situations like that, what you have to do is kind of bet on the come, that there's going to be large-scale change, and what we understand right now is not going to be what's going to exist in the environment of the future that is quite different from this. If you remember, I talked about the emergence of a new human in a new world. Well, that new human sees themselves and has a different set of priorities and values and everything else, and so it's not here, and so it's a different model. It works in a different kind of way. I'll get weird for you a little bit. There are multiple sources who seem to have a reason to have an opinion, who say that this new human is likely to be able to see auras in general, which is no big deal except because some people already do. But the fact that it'd be a general capability or characteristic is significant. That they'd be able to manifest things, you know, when you want it, when you need it. And of course, there's all kinds of law of attraction stuff and things going on all over the place. And so you see that stuff kind of percolating, coming up. They suggest that telepathy will be widespread, and so you'll not only be in everybody's head, but you'll know whether they're telling you the truth and all of those kinds of things. Now, I don't know what the business model in that space is. But what I know is you don't need an economy like the one we need now, because if I can make it when I need it, then, you know, whatever. It gets rid of the insurance industry. It gets rid of the advertising business. It truncates politics because you can tell whether somebody's lying or not, or whether they're telling the truth. And I mean, it's just weird, different kind of space. But that's, from my perspective, the essence of what we're going into. And so how you do business and how you trade value and what value is in that context is just an interesting question.
So I have a follow-up to that, in that what you're suggesting, that there is going to be an elite class of humans developing, is that correct? And that the rest of us become sub-class?
No, I didn't say that. No. What my understanding of the kind of the dynamics and the process is there's some catalytic event, seems like a pulse of energy from the sun to me. That's the best guess I got right now. Yeah. It affects everyone, right? And it affects the animals and the plants and everything. It by the way, what they say is that it turns on and activates strings of your DNA that have been dormant all this time, and that's what gives you these capabilities that you didn't have. So everybody gets it, right? The question then is, how do you respond to it? And in general, the understanding or what's being proposed is that there are some folks who are going to go, God, no, and they don't like this, and it's too weird, and they need to get their guns and, and defend themselves from whatever change. And then there are others, a goodly number of who would probably be in this room, who surf into that space and grab it and go. And that's what I'm talking about, because they, rather than waking up thinking they're going crazy and whatever, suddenly have enough of knowledge about it that they go into it. So it's it's not us and them. It's complicated by the fact that then it goes fourth dimension and fifth dimension, and so in some cases you're superimposed and you live in the same kind of space, but you're not. The Bible talks about being in the world but not of the world. It's kind of like that, and so they kind of know you're there, but they don't care because they're defending themselves, and you know that they're there, but you don't care because you're off building a new world, and so kind of.
And this shows up in the crop circles. It shows up in the crop circles that the DNA was activated by the sun. Like at 2015, there are two circles.
You're talking about the graphic of the circle? You're not talking about the cellular
Two crop circles showed up where the designs were showing that our DNA was activated by the sun, like you said, that we'll have more strands in our DNA. And that's exactly right, what you said.
And I mow my field all the time.
My question is first to Eric and then to Ken, if you'd be so kind. What was your favorite experiment that you've ever done, or most special experiment to you, and why was it special? What did you learn? And if you want to talk about that, I would love to hear it. Thanks.
Well, I've been doing thousands of experiments since I was 6 years old, so I can't focus on one, but it was delightful when I tripped the reverse power relays at the Richmond substation, knocked the town out. Oh, that would have been in the early 90s. So the situation is there was a conflict between the owner of the shipyard and the power company. And this guy owned one of the biggest Navy motor rewinding businesses in the area. And our ship came sailing in to have the bottom redone, and his crew ran to him and said, "Hey, Steinmetz is on this ship." And then we got together, and he explained anomalous electrical bills and whatever, and so he understood everything about the reactive power and all that to some degree, or he had people that did. So I was just finishing my paper on the four-quadrant, what did I call it? Symbolic representation of the alternating electric wave. And I'd come up with a mathematical error that said that if I ran a negative reactance wave back to the substation, that it would generate energy, which had to be an error. But the experiment is in the compressor plant, we had 8 500 horsepower, 2400 volt synchronous motors, and the reactive power requirements of the shipyard were rather extreme. To pump out these graving docks that you sink aircraft carriers down into have some rather large induction motors and tends to dim the lights in the entire city when they get fired up, and they have to do it only at night, and there's all these complications. So the penalization on the kilovar hour meter was costly, so we overexcited the machines and then decided, well, let's just keep going and raise the negative kilovar output higher and get the kilovar hour meter to turn backwards. So we brought it up to another level, and then we went out to the metering building, and well, the power company had the meter set so that it wouldn't turn backwards. So in my coyote mind state, I go, well, let's bring the thing up to maximum capacity. And we created, let's see, it would be 8 times 400,000 volt-amperes reactive. And we sent this back to the substation. So as we brought the thing up a little at a time, I'm sure all the gasoline and oil pumping facilities from the various oil companies that fed the ships were noticing that their induction motors started to sound very musical. And as the wave started working its way back towards the substation, as there wasn't enough to eat it up, all of a sudden everything went black. Kind of like what happened to Tesla in the middle of his lightning experiment at Colorado Springs. His glory was extinguished. The whole city went dark. Pacific Gas and Electric seemed to arrive right away. I don't know how they determined that we did it. I guess, we had this nice 600 amp double delta 6-phase line, 12 kV coming in, so there wouldn't be any problem with overcurrent with something like that. And then I ended up 2 days later with the owner of the shipyard and myself sitting in the Pacific Gas and Electric Company boardroom with the district vice president and the business manager and the chief engineer. And I was sitting on one side and the VP was sitting on the other side. And I presented my case, and the little persnickety engineer, was, well, this isn't and that. But at any rate, he was arguing with Steinmetz. I've been working for 4 years on the theory and calculation of alternating current phenomena book, and I burned the guy's flesh off his body with the answer, and he just, and the management was taking delight in it. The VP got up and was standing over my shoulder looking at, these graphs and equations, and I was a real idiot. I didn't realize that PG&E wanted to adopt me. And instead, I stayed loyal to the jackass that owned the shipyard who burned us and wrecked the hull on our ship, and I ended up, well, the story goes a little further, but it's not electrical. but I don't know if you want to hear it or not. It might be distracting from the theme, so.
no, say. Okay.
And then Ken?
Nothing that grandiose. I got sick of, ticked off that people kept telling me that blood was not magnetic, so I thought, well, the heck with them, I'm going to show them. So I stuck a knife in my hand, not too deeply, and squirted out some blood onto 2 large optical flats and put a couple drops of dissolution agent, and I made a magnetic viewer out of my own blood, and that shut them up. But I've been contacted by a couple people, and it's possible to use that plasma spectroscopy to identify at least possible precursors in third world countries with a small, cheap device like hemophilia or other iron deficiency or over iron deficiency issues in someone's blood just by a simple few drops of blood. And to me, that's just fascinating. Other than using ferrofluid, which is just nanoparticle iron with oleic acid surfactant, you're just using the nanoparticles in human blood and the plasma as the surfactant, and using that as a a visual device to see the iron in your blood. I mean, so nothing as grandiose, obviously, as Dollard, who I've read his books, each one of them, several times, and God knows this is no exaggeration. I mean, his videos easily 30 times over. And I think I've nearly memorized them, and every time he says, you have no chance of understanding electricity without a firm grasp of counter space, and I'm just cheering behind the computer. There's nobody in the room, and the crowd's kind of quiet, and I wanted to give thanks to Dollard for his lifelong work and him, everything that he's done. I mean, I know this is not part of the question. I just wanted to say thanks to Dollard for selfless, incredible, tiring, thankless work. I'm not saying it's thankless, but I mean just everything that you've done. Thank you, Dollard.
You're welcome.
Oh.
What's that?
Yeah, go ahead.
The most interesting experiment I ever did was recently. And this is, hello? Okay. I'm, of course, not a physicist, but my father gave me a certain attitude towards reality, and that if I see an opportunity for an experiment, I'll run it. And when I was doing the top 10 UFO riddles, I somehow ran across a quotation from Neil deGrasse Tyson, who said that, why do flying saucers spin? Because only stupid aliens build flying saucers. And I thought, wow, he's got all the answers. But there's another way to look at it. By the way, they don't know the laws of physics, he said. So it happened that, of course, he's being funny. He has that kind of
No, he's
stage
not.
presence.
He's arrogant.
I can, well, we might not laugh, but we could, you can do this experiment on your own, and it is partial confirmation of the technology in use in flying saucers. It's very simple to do. The reason that that flying saucers spin on takeoff is that while they're in the power-up cycle, they're trying to put the gravity effect through the entire craft, and there's the electrons are being made to precess by the magnetic field, and then from the center top of the saucer there is a pulse of microwave energy, and that causes the precessing electrons to flip over, and that orients the nuclei of the aluminum atoms in the hull. Then it's the precession of the electrons that's causing the hull of the craft to spin while they're in startup mode. So I thought, well, I'll just get myself a Halloween dinner plate. I think it was about this wide. And I painted it silver so it would look like a flying saucer. And then I got a gyroscope to represent the electrons. And in aggregate, one gyroscope is good enough to represent the electrons in one quadrant of the saucer. And I put it in the bathtub so it was free floating. And I spun the gyroscope, and it started to precess. And as it precessed, sure enough, the plate started making that slow motion turn that we see or that witnesses report and has never been explained, but was explained by my father's physical theory. You can do it yourself. And when you do it, it gives you a weird feeling, because instead of flying saucers being something from a movie, now there's one in your bathtub. It's a delightful feeling.
Is that experiment in here?
It's in the top 10.
Okay, yeah, in that one.
Yeah.
Good question?
Hi, I wanted to go back to our discussion of solar events affecting the expression of human biology, and I was wondering if anyone on the panel thought that if a solar event could affect human biology, human capabilities, if this is related to what Aaron was speaking about of the Ebner effect and turbocharging the trout and the plants and so forth.
I've done quite an extensive study of solar terrestrial type of activities in my research, and humans are highly affected by what goes on in the sun. So if you have a situation like now where the sun is dimmed out, it tends to be kind of everybody is like lulled and depressed, but when the solar activity is high, then you start to get like more activity and creativity. When there's expulsions from the sun, this is one of the reasons why I kept close track of this stuff, was to get rid of the episodes of mass insanity, or not get rid of them, but keep them out of my life. They would be all wigged out, they'd be exhibiting flu symptoms or whatever, be arguing in fights. I knew it was time to avoid humans, and I have for me it was the opposite effect, being feral, is I just went and ran out in the woods, and these things would incredibly excite my mind and body, and it's humans directly respond to what the sun's doing. And the planetary alignments affect the solar activity, and it was basically discovered by scientists, Radio Corporation of America, that the planetary alignments were affecting the ionosphere through the activity on the sun, and via the sun, it's obvious that this is how astrology works, because RCA was practicing radio astrology, and it really didn't matter what Einstein said, because either you're going to get your signal to where it's supposed to go across the Pacific or you're not, and if you don't get dial tone, you don't get paid. So Einstein's not really important in that situation.
When you say RCA, are you talking about Dewey?
The Radio Corporation of America.
Oh, but the scientist, was this Dewey who founded something like the Center for the Study of Cycles or something like that?
I'm in a bad zone with the speakers. Maybe somebody can tell me
Did
what
you
he's
say
saying.
Dewey?
Yeah, I think his name was Dewey, who
It was.
I thought he got a grant from RCA.
The scientist the name was Nelson.
Nelson, yeah.
He worked in the radio propagation department of the Radio Corporation of America. RCA Laboratories, was a pretty substantial outfit. I mean, it wasn't like Bell Labs, but nevertheless, I mean, there was a lot developed out of RCA Laboratories, and because RCA basically adopted me, I had direct access to all of that stuff when I was in high school. And then after I got out of high school, I was kind of adopted by Sonoma State College. I don't know quite exactly how it all worked out. I was kind of feral at the time and eating out of garbage cans, but somehow somebody from Sonoma State College, I needed a place to put my RCA equipment. So they made arrangements for me to move it to Sonoma State College, and then they decided, well, let's see if we can figure out a way to get some money or something. So they ran me through all the tests, and then it turned out to be that I had a score of 99.95%, the national average in natural sciences. So immediately I was given all glom rights and a place to do my work, and I did an intensive 4-year study on solar terrestrial activities around the period of the total planetary alignment between October 13th and 15th in 1980. And the effects on the sun were absolutely phenomenal. It was the perfect time to do this research. And I had this incredible HF receiving facility where I developed this thing that I call the Earth stereo, where you have let's say you have a radio broadcasting station in China. And then you have here, where I was in California, you have an antenna system that's kind of like your ears. You have two antennas that are pointing like maybe at 90 degrees. And then when the signal comes in, this is something that RCA developed called dual diversity, where all the receivers there were two receivers with coherent oscillators between them, and you had a pair of antennas, one standing before the other in their case. And if one antenna takes a fade, statistically, the other one is getting stronger. So the receiver selects between the two signals, so that way all these ionospheric variations are canceled out. Well, what I did is I removed the diversity combiner and ran it into stereo with a pair of speakers and arranged the antennas at 90 degrees to each other in quadrature. And what happens is when some music, let's say, comes in from a radio station in China, is you get this really bizarre stereo effect where all the instruments are floating around in the room. And their motions and positions in the room are determined by the state of the ionosphere. I was doing this in my research facility at Landers. And at Landers, people would drive 500 miles to come there to listen to this Earth stereo. And there's a particular jamming station in China that just played Chinese classical music to jam out other radio stations. And that was the music was fantastic. And the problem was reverse is you would be interfered with by the station they were trying to jam. But my antennas were directive enough that oftentimes I could cancel that out. And during cosmic disturbances, when the ionosphere is all worked up, the music would just go wild. And what happened one morning is I had this thing going full blast through my 200-watt stereo sound system. I didn't have any neighbors, so it was good. And the sounds that came out of the facility, I didn't need to lock the doors. No one would go near the place. I was standing at the desk, and I had a small motorcycle headlight laying on the desk that I used as a ballast for battery charging. And I didn't have any leads connected or anything, and there was this one part of the music where we get into this percussion and what have you, and it just was the right ionospheric conditions that the headlight was thrown off the desk into the air at about 6 inches and then landed back on the desk. And I used to sit in between the speakers and feel these waves pass through my body. And then I got the idea that, this is actually could be a healing methodology. Because I know during the organ concerts at Grace Cathedral they performed during this planetary alignment. The results, the audience just was flabbergasted. The organist just jumped back from the organ keyboards in terror after the concert was over. And we would go to these concerts during this alignment sequence that occurred for about a year as all the planets pulled into phase. And you could feel the standing wave patterns of the sound. There was 2 seats in the church. And you'd have to get there a long time beforehand to make sure you got those seats. Those were the most important seats, and they were at the focal point of all 4 of the organs in the church. The churches are all built as giant crosses, and you'd have to sit in that cross. And you could feel these molecules of music moving through your body. They were actually like ball bearings. There was like a matrix of them. You could feel this stuff pulsating and moving through your body. And this is what the Earth stereo is doing, a similar type of thing. So this is, I have another set of these RCA receivers, but unfortunately it takes a 50-acre antenna field to do this, and I don't have that anymore. But if I had the means, this is something I'm really intent on trying to duplicate. To find another one of these RCA receivers was a hellacious effort. A very rich person found that there was 2 left at the Voice of America in Greece and had them shipped to me. So right now they're sitting in some shipping container in California, and I can't do anything about it, and I don't know what's going to happen to them. I don't have any antenna field, but I still have this delusion in my head that one day maybe I can get this stuff back together again, but there's no money or place to do this stuff anymore. But it was interesting when it happened. So this is what's going on electrically also. Because we live in this giant capacitor between the Earth and the ionosphere. and you're getting these impulses from the sun, and it excites the Earth ionosphere capacitance, and there's all this stuff going on in this space that's passing through our bodies and causing all these different things. And like he was talking about, there could be some kind of impulse someday that just repolarizes everything. That's theoretically possible.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that was lengthy.
I got a quick question for Eric. If the solar flux is in a downtime, is the MWO or any other method sufficient to replicate the type of something to, be a mood elevator, or to replace the lack of, the higher solar flux?
That's conceivable, but I can't say yes or no.
Kind of makes sense, but
It's
who
conceivable.
knows? Yeah. Stephen?
Yeah, since we've come to understand that we are charged up by radiant energy, that our bodies are charged up by radiant energy, I was blown away when Eric one day told me that he thought the sun was a giant etheric generator coming straight transformer coming straight from counter space.
Exactly. The sun's hollow.
Yeah, I love that. And I was wondering if any of you or any of the other presenters could talk about that idea of how, obviously it interacts with our body, drives everything of everything we do. It's part of it, and how it must obviously be charging us up right now. So, but that blew me away when you told me that. I asked you once before what electricity was. And you said, we don't know. And I said, well, yeah, but what is it? What do you think it is? And you said, well, it's something that we can build an apparatus and allow the universe to express itself.
Like
And that was
16
beautiful.
other things.
That was beautiful, but we don't know what it is. So if you want to talk to that, that would be great. Like about the etheric a transformer.
Yeah, that's kind of, I think when we were showing that circuit board multi-wave oscillator antenna, because Peter Linden remembers he was there when all this stuff was going together, and he quickly pointed out that it works best with no power because the power is already there. But there's a simple kind of parable to describe how much power exists around us. So the velocity of the Earth, we really can't tell what the absolute velocity of the Earth is without some kind of point of reference, but I think it's, I could be wrong, I think it's somewhere around 250,000 miles an hour. I'm not certain, but it's of that magnitude. So now, if we take this glass of water that's moving 250,000 miles an hour, what happens if we throw it off the train? It's going to make quite a blast. So there's a lot of energy just sitting here in how fast it's flying through space. But the problem is, if we try to harness that energy, then how is it going to influence the environment in warping gravity or causing eddies? Or see, this is the flaw of the concept of energy. Energy is a flawed concept. I keep pointing this out. The human race really needs to go beyond energy. And energy is always, it's like the sewage element of the ether. And it's a bad news deal. And it's, no matter what you do, it's still energy. Whether it's rabbit turds or coyote turds or cat turds, they're still turds, and they're still going to stink, and maggots are going to breed in them. So this is my idea of energy. There needs to be something to go beyond energy.
And you're talking about using power.
Well, Tesla was aiming for a power-based technology rather than energy-based technology, because all the energy is returned at the end of the cycle. I can take a 12,000 volt power line, and I can put a 1 amp or 1 ohm reactance coil across that 12,000 volt power line, and I'm going to get 12,000 amps. 12,000 amps at 12,000 volts. That's a lot of kilovolt amperes reactive. The magnetic field's going to pull nails out of wooden ships. And the substation transformer obviously is not going to like the idea. But I can take a 1 ohm capacitor and put that across the power line. And that will pull 12,000 amps at 12,000 volts. But there won't be any external magnetic field. It'll all be in the counter space in between the plates of the capacitor. But nevertheless, the dielectric inside the capacitor is not going to particularly like the idea. So, but if I take the two of them and I put them in parallel, no current's drawn from the substation. The capacitor feeds the reactance coil, and the reactance coil feeds the capacitor, and I have whatever 12,000 times 12,000 is bouncing back and forth at 60 cycles a second between the two reactances, but no energy is being produced or consumed. There's no energy at all in that system. Now, if you try to draw any energy from it, then it dies out. But nevertheless, that's a lot of activity. And there's no energy required to do that other than that to overcome the losses. So this is what Tesla was heading into, was more of a power base rather than an energy-based technology. But Tesla, was such a cryptic person, it's hard to, we really don't know what he really had in mind. But that kind of gives you an idea of what I'm talking about.
Okay, we got about just one more minute. Maybe final question?
Well, can you speak to the rise in the Schumann resonance and what activity that might be having on us?
Well, from what I understand, experiments indicate that those extremely low frequencies have profound effects on the humans, but I haven't done a lot of research in that area, and my experiments seem to indicate to the contrary on a lot of stuff. I found with my research that the natural frequency of the Earth was more around 18 kilocycles, but I never got the chance to put the antennas together to get down into that really low band. The antennas that were designed were basically 4 25-foot utility poles arranged in a square, and then 1,200 pair telephone cable would be made in a rectangle or a square, two of them at right angles each other between the 4 poles, and then like the degaussing coils on the minesweepers and ships and whatever to make them magnetically invisible, I would hook all those wires in series, and with a 20-foot aperture and 2,000 or 3,000 turns with electrostatic shielding of the aluminum wrapping around the cable and running that into a suitable amplifier, then I would have been able to get some kind of quantitative data on those low frequencies. But before I could ever get to that point, my facility was destroyed and taken away from me, so I never got down that low.
Any final comments?
We should all
Ken?
give a big thanks to you for organizing all these great minds and people to come together.
And everybody who came this weekend, also, thank you, and you deserve to give yourself a round of applause, because I know what it takes to, take time away from your family and your friends and your work to, travel across the country or the world to come to things like this. So thank you so much, and we hope to see you next year. Okay, thank you.